Good morning, everybody, to this discussion. What's the HR agenda for your growing company for 2021? Super excited to have you all here in here. Ben just raised the question, where is everybody joining from? It's super inspiring to see where people are coming from today. We have a lot of people come from the UK, Sweden, Germany, Belgium. I saw one person from Afghanistan. So we do see there's a big spread of participants, so super excited for that. So welcome everybody. My name is Michael, country manager Nordics here at a company called Personio. I'm super excited to welcome you all in here today. What's the HR agenda of your growing company in 2021? This is a question we're not only going to ask to four wonderful panelists that I'm going to introduce to you all in a minute, but also a question to everybody out there who is watching this discussion today. So we're super excited to moderate also a conversation between everybody here in the audience and the panelists. So we have people with vast experience, not only in the audience, but also sitting on the panel. So if you have any questions, say, we want to do this or that in our HR teams next year, today is your chance to get some input, inspiration, challenging for those topics for you next year. Just a few things for housekeeping. We have two functionalities that are very valuable for you. We have the chat, which should be for everything if you do not hear anyone properly, if you have some technical issues, and we have the Q&A. So whenever you have questions that you want to ask to the panel or to other people in the audience, please use the Q&A functionality, because this is where both myself and my colleague Ben, who has happily joined to support, are going to look after to see which are the questions that we want to ask to the group. If anything other than that pops up, just use the chat. We'll try to address everything that comes up today. So let's not lose any time. Who are we having today? So first of all, I'm super excited to welcome Chloe Palmer, who has recently joined a new role as head of HR of Accel. Chloe has vast experience in HR. She had various roles at companies like Nestle, Barclays, did join Secret Escapes in 2015, built the HR function there, and now, I think beginning of last week, joined the new role at Accel. So super excited to have you on the panel today. Welcome, Chloe. Second, Rick Kershaw. He's currently Chief People Officer at Peakon. Peakon is a Danish UK company, really beautifully example for today's panel and the session. Rick also has vast experience in all different kind of HR roles across enterprise companies like let me get that, Pepsi, Mitsubishi. He has built the European HR team for Expedia and now leading the people operations for Peakon. Welcome, Rick. Then Matthias, representing the Swedish startup Einride. Einride is a super cool company building a self-driving truck, autonomously driving truck. If I do everything wrong here now, Matthias, just jump in and correct me on that. So heavily growing company from the Stockholm startup scene. So really excited to also have your perspective on today's discussion. And last but not least, home play for our new Chief People Officer, Ross. I'm super excited to have you on here today. Ross also has a lot of experience building HR structures, processes for companies like Virgin Media, Tesco, King, recently TransferWise, and now very proud to have you as our Chief People Officer over at Personio. That's about the panelists. So welcome everybody on the panel, and welcome to everybody in the audience. And now I would like to invite you all to unmute yourselves and let's jump into that. And I want to start a quick round with the really generic question of what is your HR agenda for 2021? So what are the most important themes? What are you going to focus on next year? And I want to start with the order that we're having in that slide. So Chloe, if you want to kick off, I'll be really excited to hear what your agenda for 2021 is.
Of course. Well, welcome everybody. It's great to hear we've got people from all over the world. So in my role at Accel, which I started last week, I'm supporting the internal team, but also external portfolio companies as well that we've invested in. So I think the HR agenda is going to be really broad, but I think some of the things that will be quite thematic across a number of fast-growing companies is the very obvious kind of work from home, but how do we stay connected? How do we not just stay connected to the vision of the company and what we're doing, but as a team and a community as well? And yes, there's lots of amazing tools on the market around comms, but how do you really use that to work for your business? And along with that piece of connectivity and working, I think learning and development is a huge piece. You know, as we go through our careers, we're all apprentices in some ways. We're always learning from those around us, and we learn a huge amount from dialogue, observing people in the office, seeing how things go, asking questions, etc. We're losing a lot of that working from home. And I think particularly for people who are earlier in their career or moving into a new role or field, how do we recreate that learning experience, development experience remotely, I think is a key one. There's lots of other things I'll talk about, but I know there will be other things the panelists will bring up. But another one that I think is fascinating is this year has changed the way we behave, consume, operate. And this year has been wild. And I think we took a while to kind of find our feet and get into a new rhythm. Next year, I think, is a really good opportunity to reflect back on this year and what have we learned and what opportunities has this year actually created for us as a business commercially. I think is a question we should be asking for our customers. You know, how could we be serving them differently or better in whatever the new normal is? And I think secondly, as HR people leads, it's an opportunity for us to challenge some of the stuff that maybe we haven't challenged in the past. Working from home, again, kind of classic example, but I've got friends who weren't able to work from home previously because for IT reasons or compliance reasons, suddenly within 2 weeks, everyone was working from home and it's possible. You know, this has given us an opportunity to challenge the status quo. So let's make sure we're doing that and not missing any opportunities that have arisen from what has been an unprecedented year.
Awesome. So already within first 2 minutes, 4 exciting topics that I took. So really for the remote setting, how do you work with that learning and development? A lot of focus on that. But also what I found really interesting is say what opportunities will come out as a business, and I'd like in a few minutes dive into that. What you see, how can an HR function support in such a topic? Saying how can we really benefit from the opportunities for our customers? So maybe you can use 2 or 3 minutes to prepare on that while I'll ask Rick. So Rick, you having been in this role already this year, so taking the learnings from this year, what are you going to focus on your agenda in 2021?
Thanks, Michael. Welcome everyone. Chloe did a fantastic intro there, because I think as HR leaders, we're all thinking about the learnings from this year and how we really become more effective as organizations coming into 2021. I think high on my agenda is the continued focus on how do we move more to our remote and hybrid ways of working and make sure that they're embedded within our organization. We as a tech business are already fairly flexible and fairly agile, but I think what this has exposed, certainly for me, is some of our ways of working need to be a lot more remote first in our thinking. So how do we do that? And that's everything from, as Chloe started to talk about, communications, making sure actually that those traditions that are important for your organization, that are like linked to your values, are still embedded in those sort of new ways of connecting, and making sure that that continues to be effective. And as we look for talent in a growing business, how do we configure ourselves or continue to build our organization in a way that makes sense for, you know, attracting talent and continuing to be very talent focused as we continue to grow. I think additionally, leadership capability and leadership development is a big area, certainly for me in the coming year. I think a lot of my leaders are probably relatively new leaders in some cases, and went to having dispersed and remote teams very quickly in 2020. And I think we have to continue to build and support the capabilities that make sure that leaders continue to be effective in in that space and really be understanding of how they become their best leaders they can in ways of working that are going to continue to evolve. And then I think finally, from my perspective, is more around sort of how does our reward proposition continue to evolve as well, looking at continued focus on mental health and well-being as being big areas where we've seen what we offer continue to evolve. But actually, this year's sort of helped me understand really where I think we can continue to provide more support. And that's both cost and non-cost type activities, but I think it's opened a big debate, and I think we need to really continue to seize the opportunity from those learnings as we come through into 2021. So it's going to be a packed year for, I think, anyone who's working in the HR function coming through.
Awesome. Thank you, Rick. And you go to Matthias. Matthias, what would you say if you have to break it down to 2 or 3 topics for you, both yourself and Einride? What is the focus going to be next year?
Yeah, thanks. And of course, hi everyone. I would say that a couple of things that actually Rick talked about, I would say that apply to us also. We had a 2020 where we kind of was being forced into a lot of more processes and structure than we are used to be, since we are a pretty rapid growth startup. We have had a really agile culture and a really agile way of working, and we was forced into a little bit more processes and structure that might have been in the plan to actually go for a little bit later, but we had to do it this year instead. So I would say next year coming up, we are looking into double the size, going from maybe 80 to 160, 170 people, something like that, and doing that in this kind of pandemic world that we're looking into 2021, with the onboarding problems and also a bit of talent acquisition problems in terms of actually how you introduce yourself remote, and actually looking into the right type of culture fit into these companies. I think that we will have a lot of things to do in talent acquisition and finding the right culture fit, because actually identifying the key players for us in this stage that we are now, this is the people that we will build the company upon the next 2, 3, 4 years, and they are extremely important for our company. So this key recruitment that we do now, we will this is the people that we will build the company upon, and I think it will be extremely important to actually find the right people. I think the remote type of working, it won't be that problematic when we actually onboard the people, because we are in that way of working already, and we will go international. So independent of actually doing this in the corona way, we would have to do it anyway, because we are moving into the US, we're moving into the other Nordic countries, and also a bit of Europe. So we would probably do this lot remote anyway. But I would say actually finding these people that we will build the company upon, and keeping up with the pace that we actually need to do this during 2021, that would be our main objectives, I think.
Awesome. Great to hear that. Thank you, Matthias. All right, Ross.
Yes.
Looking at a company that has already grown from around 350 to 600 employees this year, Personio. So joining a fast race, what are you most excited about for Personio's HR focuses next year?
So first of all, hi everyone. Great that a lot of you can make it, and lovely to see all the different locations and countries people are dialing in from. So I'm in week 5 of my role at Personio, which is amazing. And I guess some of the things, top of mind, I just echo what Chloe, Matthias, and Rick have talked about. There's definitely some common themes, I think, that are transcending, all of our worlds across the globe. But specifically for us, there's 3 things. So one is rethinking our employee experience through more of a permanent hybrid working lens. So that's everything from how we attract and hire through to how we offboard. So we're kind of taking our kind of product mindset and thinking, okay, what does that mean when we look at all the different touch points for a candidate or an employee? So that's quite an interesting and exciting piece of work we're going to kick off early next year. Secondly, we're looking at introducing our first kind of job framework and career map as a whole business. We want to do that now because we know that, we're going to double in size again next year. And we know when we get past 1,000 employees, it's a lot harder to start to build that infrastructure in. So we're going to do the work now, and that will help us for like career pathing or reward philosophy, benchmarking, common language. So it's got a lot of great benefits for us. And then finally, developing our leads, developing everyone, but developing our leads specifically, because I know from experience at, King and TransferWise that they're the multipliers. So, the people team are there, to support the organization, but really if you want to help employees deal with the challenges of today and tomorrow's world, that, our leaders need to be skilled and ready for that. So, so we're definitely going to be investing heavily in our population in Personio.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So already one question popped up, but first I would like to deep dive on that first thought, Chloe, that you had. So how can HR become a key driver of business growth, essentially when the business world is changing or has changed this year? And you mentioned it, like you want to look at what are the opportunities this year has created for Accel in general. How can HR support a organization in order to be successful in that matter?
Yeah, great question. I think the first thing is, understand what the real growth levers for your business are. It's quite easy to default to top talent, skilled managers, strong vision, values, etc. But actually, commercially, what are the levers for your business? Do you understand the cohort model that your business might have, for example? Do you really understand the margins of the product or service that you're selling? Understand the real levers for growth in your business and work alongside the leadership team to understand, where do they think the big opportunities are, or what's the stuff that keeps them up at night, and where's the risk appetite for testing or trialing new things in your space or industry. Because I say the world has changed, and I do think that creates challenges as well as opportunities, and that therefore means what might have been your growth levers and opportunities previously might look slightly different now. Making sure that you really understand those and challenge them, hypothesize around what else could be out there, create some hypotheses and test them, and work alongside your business leaders on that. So I think understanding it is the kind of place to start. And then once you have those conversations, you go, okay, right, I now understand. So it might be, for example, that your go-to-market strategy is changing slightly and you need to upskill in the marketing and sales team. Great. What does that mean in terms of capability in those teams? If you've got it, do you need to bring it in? Can you develop it? That's when you start translating it into how HR can really help. But I think the first place is to start with, where are those growth priority areas, and then taking it from there. Got it.
So Matthias, I understood that for Einride specifically, finding the right people next year will be essential to as a foundation for the future business growth. What is your idea on what will make you successful on finding and being able to recruit the right people?
Can I add one thing to Chloe first?
Of course.
Because I just had one thought there, and that I think it's a bit dangerous, because I think that HR has a way of talking about. I might go the opposite way of the topic of today a bit here, but I think we have a way of actually talking a little bit too much about the HR agenda. And I really think that we should talk about the business agenda and what are the HR parts of that, because we are talking about, okay, what should we do in our HR agenda, and that becomes sometimes not actually picking the right processes for business growth, more or less for the HR growth and our way of looking at things. And I think that we should probably look at the business agenda and then actually add the HR layer to that. I think that is the way that we need to do it, and I think that is in the type of changes that is happening today in the world. I think that is more essential today.
Maybe picking on that and expanding this question to the whole panel. Do you have the impression that in some stages of a company's development, the business agenda and the HR agenda are not necessarily aligned or are detached from each other, or should be closer than it is in some parts? Maybe looking at rather growth phases or the early stages. What's your experience on that?
So I think just from my experience of being at different stages of growth businesses and maturity, I think in the early stages, you know, when things are pretty scrappy and agile, the HR team usually maybe is one person or it's outsourced. And then as they're starting to grow, they're really focused on building in the principles of helping the company to attract the people that they need to achieve their plans, you know, onboard them, pay them, you know, so it's very kind of functional, operational, responsibilities. I think then as you start to grow as an organization and scale up, I think it's really important that when you're at that size of, say, I don't know, 100, 150 employees, that you then start to build maybe the momentum to add in some more roles into the people function. And that allows you as a leader, whatever your role is, to then go, okay, to Chloe's point, what are we driving for as a business over the next 6 months, 12 months, however long your planning cycle is, and then really think hard about what are the things that you're doing, you know, to achieve that. And then the other side, I liked what Matthias said about the how. So often we talk a lot about what we're doing, our people agenda, people strategy, but then how we work as a people team, and I've been in that situation myself, is we sometimes hold back by processes or policies or the way we're structured or the way that we work. So I think it's also, when you're looking at what you're doing, you also have to think about how you work. And you know, get some non-HR eyes on that, and I think they'll very quickly tell you, you know, what's working well and what's not, and then you can make a decision yourself about how to, you know, how to grow your function. But I think at that stage, it's really important to be really aligned, and your people strategy should, you know, be very much your business strategy, as we said earlier.
Okay. And I think, like, if you looking at the stage that we are in, like, I guess that we are the smallest company here, but we have like an awesome opportunity in the HR here to actually position ourselves within the company, like depending on like the position that we take as an HR department now will probably like follow the company when we actually grow bigger. Like, okay, will we be this reactive HR process department, or will we be close to the business, being an advisor, being a consultative? And I think that is the position, of course, that we want, that we will actually add value to the business. And that is something that I think the decisions we do now and the position that we take now, that will actually follow us for a couple of years. And I think it's really important for the companies in this stage, when you are maybe 50, 100 people, that you actually take the right position then, because otherwise you will become a reactive, not that close to the business HR departments.
And I've had experiences both in sort of super fast growth and scaled businesses that continue to grow. And I think the danger when you're scaling, if you get into that HR product mindset of, we're going to create great products to put out there for the organization, but you're missing that link to the business. And actually you've got to be focused on the employee experience and the employee journey overall, and what actually your business is trying to deliver. You're just throwing stuff out there and wasting cash within your business. And it doesn't matter whether you're 50 people or 30,000. The experience then is the reputation of the team, the quality of what you're delivering, and actually how you're enabling your business to be successful. And so for me, I think a lot more on that product mindset of, as you're working on HR products across the whole employee experience, it's like, let's develop something. Is it meaningful for our business? Does that work right now? Are we going to drive those correct levers within our business overall? But then fundamentally not getting wedded to sort of gold standard products that you're going to have to change over time as your business continues to grow. And I think some of my experience in scale businesses is they want that gold standard HR product that's going to last for years. And the reality is, we've seen during this year that, you know, the game's fully changed now. So what you have in some of those HR products has to change now anyway.
I found really interesting. So both to support your point, Rick, but also what Matthias said, it's essential in that stage of a company, or basically in any stage, that HR has a role where they can have this impact and can have a strong opinion and can shape the business success. Something that we often see when we speak out to rather growing companies between like the 50 and 200 out there in the market, that they might not necessarily have that position within their own organization, because it could be that it has been founded by rather technical focused founders, or just that they don't have the experience from other roles, so they cannot come with experience to say this is the right thing to do. Do you guys have any recommendations of what should HR leaders that do not have a strong position within their organization yet do in order to have a bigger impact on the business agenda in their companies? So how can they strengthen their own position?
I can just add some experience in here. So I think how I've given advice to people I've worked with in the past is start small. So if you're starting from a baseline of like nothing, and you're not part of those leadership meetings, sometimes that's the case. You might be on, you might be new to the company, or you're not part of those discussions. I think is work individually with some leaders who have got some real business challenges that you can then turn into some people solutions or things that you can do to help them to show the impact of not only your role and your capability, but also then can help with further investment. So if you are trying to get an extra person to come and help take the admin so you can do more of the forward thinking, or if you want to buy like an HRIS to help you scale away some of your coordination work. That's how I've done it in the past. And I guess alongside that is with those solutions is have metrics or KPIs. I know it's quite trite, and I know we talk about it a lot, but I see a lot of plans where we don't have that. So, talk the language that you're in your business. So if you have OKRs, then use OKRs. If you have simple KPIs or metrics, then use them. And then you can show the impact that you're having with the work that you're doing. And then I think, I think sometimes it's about just, doing that and then putting yourself forward into, okay, if I can come along and take part in some of the discussions, then I can feed into, where I can help then at the next level rather than being, at the side. So I think, demonstrating through the work that you're doing is definitely the track that I've taken in the past.
Awesome. All right. I want to jump on one thing that you shared, Rick, in your what's the focus for your role and team at Peakon next year is doing more for the mental health. So Andrew Rogers asked the question, looking at mental health and well-being specifically for next year, what is it that you assume people and businesses will need in this space in 2021? So is there any common theme on that?
I think there's a whole raft of different options, I think, from the organizations. I think, fundamentally, I think it's listening to your employees directly and figuring out what you're hearing coming back in and trying to create that range of solutions that's meaningful, because I think we're across 5 locations at Peakon and trying to have appropriate support. So we have EAP solutions out there, which we are trying to figure out, are we really getting best value for, and is that meaningful for our employees? I think there's more about awareness and making sure that people understand, the build up and actually some of those anxiety factors and how they can recognize it in themselves. I think there are some very simple things like the basics of making sure that managers can identify and have maybe some of those conversations that they might not have felt comfortable having in the past, but they see and are connected to their people on a daily basis. So they will see and hear the things that are seen and unseen, and therefore will be a good conduit to that. I think we have to continue to figure out, coaching support, counseling support, and ultimately, I think more about how do you just keep communication going? How do you use the small things like managers checking in with people? I mean, these are not cost items. They're just more about how do you grow empathetic leadership and make sure that people continue to use that range that's available as well and grow some of those capabilities. I think there isn't a set playbook on this. I think there's a range of solutions. I'm lucky. I think we have a fairly strong vocal workforce on this as well, and they're coming to me with tons of solutions and ideas that we're looking into that would provide them the support. So I think we're trying to figure out what's a couple of those things that we add to some of our existing support that's going to try and create that rounded package for employees to make sure that there's ways, if they've got issues, that they can escalate them, there's people that they can talk to, and they're working closely with their managers on if there are any issues for people. But I think it's across that whole gambit that we've just got to be more mindful.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it will be different solutions and support for different people. And I guess the two things I would probably add to that, particularly with an international lens on this, is the openness to talk about mental health, or how people talk about mental health, is different across different countries. And if you are operating across a range of geographies, it's really important to be mindful of that, particularly say if you're in the UK, which I am. We are further ahead than some other countries talking about mental health. So when you're thinking about working with another country, you need to be mindful not coming in a very kind of UK centric way, potentially, that might not land right, because that's not what you're looking to achieve. So I think understanding some of those nuances is incredibly important. And I think the second thing, and Rick talked about it, just simply your manager checking in with you can make all the difference. To have that point of safety to talk about how you're feeling. But I also think it's important to support the managers. We rely on our managers so much, and they are the key to so many things. They're also human too, and how do we support them? So just before I left Secret Escapes earlier this year, we did a 6-week 1-hour module a week just for our managers, talking about resilience, support, team leadership. And the first 3 modules were purely for them as individuals, and then the latter 3 modules were around team, because I think it's important to have that balance. It's hard being a people manager, and our expectations on them have just heightened again when we talk about well-being and all aspects of well-being. So I think it's important not to forget that population as well.
It's a really good point. So Ross, you also mentioned that developing the leaders will be an essential point of Personio also next year. So being a leader at Personio myself, I know that we're already doing a lot of things. We have the leadership lunches where we discuss, we have a lot of trainings. I have like a monthly check-in with my strategic HR partner on all these things. So having already a good foundation of that, what is some of your thoughts that you said an organization like Personio growing from 600 to 1200 next year needs to put on top of that to even increase leadership development here?
Yeah, I think so. So you're right. There's definitely some great foundations that we have already. A couple of things that are probably top of mind in this space for us, and I think for a lot of companies, is defining kind of the expectations of a leader. And we haven't really done that yet. We have obviously a really clear and strong culture through our values and our operating principles, which I was pretty blown away at when I joined, given the job I do and seeing other companies and how they interpret their values. But to build on that, I think, we've got, a couple of you mentioned earlier, we've got a lot of new leads and leaders, either who've been promoted internally, which is what we're aiming for, but also new leaders joining from other companies and cultures with their leadership styles and their leadership backgrounds. So one of the things we need to spend some time on is thinking about what's our leadership framework and what do we expect from a lead at different career steps. And that complements the career paths we have for individual contributors. And then use that to reflect on what we've got already. So what are the products that we offer? How well do they work? What do we offer internally versus externally? I'm a big believer of, I think that, when people join an organization, to really embed them in the culture as a leader as well as an employee. So something at the front end when people join, but then as you go forward, what's the bespoke options that people can kind of pick and mix from that can balance around their job, because a lot of the day-to-day work is pretty consuming. So long programs are definitely something that we probably won't build, but we will have lots of great solutions that people can select from. Outside of that, I think I personally, as a leader, learn a lot from other leaders. So I think that whilst training and learning is really important to have for your learning pathways, I think bringing leaders together within the organization and a bit of peer mentoring as well to help people understand, what's expected when you get to the next level. And then also what I found helps is bring people from other organizations who are maybe 1 or 2 steps ahead, who then can mentor a group of leaders and help them understand some of the challenges that they're going to face in the future, based on kind of, them seeing the journey, maybe 1-2 years ahead. So those experiences, I think, are going to be the things that I'll think of implementing once we get our leadership framework defined.
When we look at that, there's obviously a lot to benefit from when you have already a couple of employees in the organization and you have experienced leaders that others can learn from. What did anyone say if you look at the growth companies that are less than 100, obviously, like the very young team, inexperienced leaders where they do not have people to learn from within the organization? What would you recommend these organizations, how to set up leadership development programs, or where to get the experience from to really build on a strong foundation if there is no vast experience in place already? I don't know who wants to take on that. Maybe Matthias, what is your approach on leadership development?
I actually had the same question myself when I listened to Ross, because I think that everything that you said, Ross, was like really, really good. And I think it's a good steps to do. But I find it hard to actually do all of these things while kind of hit the floor running when we actually onboard new leaders, because as you say, they don't have that experience, because usually they are individual contributors that are awesome at what they do, but they need to take a leadership role that they haven't had before. But we don't have the time to actually letting them have 3 or 6 months to actually learn, because they need to contribute as a leader now, because we have a lot of leadership like assignments and problems and also opportunities and stuff that they need to do from day one. And we need to have a setting that actually allows that. And that is the phase that we are right now, that we actually have pretty unexperienced leaders that have really big things to work on. And what we do is that we actually both, of course, allow them to fail from time to time. They need to be allowed to fail. And then that we are there to actually pick them up and help them and giving them the tools to actually succeed. But I think that we are in a learning phase, that we need to be close to the leaders and letting them tell us what they need, because we need to actually find the right tools that help them in the day-to-day leadership, not only looking in their way to the 1 or 2 or 3 years plan. We need to give them the tools to actually have the day-to-day talks to making sure that they don't feel that they fail in the day-to-day leadership. I think that is really essential for us.
I think, Matthias, just to follow up then, I think it's a really good point. And I've definitely been in positions in the past where, we've not had a lot of resources or a lot of budget, and we've had to be really creative. I've not always been in that lucky position where you have time or resources or money. I think, simple things that I've done in the past or helped other people with is say, get some of your leaders together and start to write down what do you think, the role of a leader is, within your company, and define that. It doesn't take a lot of, time and money to do, to define that, what's right for your company now. And I guess to Rick's point, it will evolve over time. So what you write down now might evolve when you get to, the next stage of your journey. And then use that to think about what learning can you do around it. So I've been pleasantly surprised by when I've done that, people have said, oh, I know a bit about that topic. I could maybe run a session, or, I know someone who could maybe offer to do something for free, or you might have a little bit of budget where you could, get a facilitator for something that's maybe really important to your culture, like feedback or coaching training, just to get you started. And that could give you, a few small things to get going that might not, that shares it across a number of people, rather than it being just about, I guess, you and your team.
Yeah,
I would echo that same point, Ross. I think when you start talking to people, you'd be surprised at some of the skill sets that you have within existing leaders. Or the other one is the network as well. I'm always amazed at, I often don't know the answer or the solution, and I've got some great networks, and I'll just go, help me understand what you would do here. I don't have a clue. This is the first time I've ever done this. I don't think I've got the skill. And it's amazing how you get some great insights, you get best practice sharing. You also then get, you sometimes even get offers of someone saying, well, I'll come and, facilitate something for you if you want, and you can see how that works before you're sort of going off and thinking about investment in any product. So I think it's definitely leverage what's within, but then figure out how you can leverage networks externally. I also think you don't have to put too much pressure on yourself to think that we've got to have formalized programs or you have to do this in such a way. I think you get to that point over time. It's much more about solving for right now and making sure that nobody breaks along the way, right? That's the other thing that we don't want to do. We don't want any managers to be falling down. We don't want employees to have bad experiences. So that agility to be able to say, how do we solve in the moment, and making sure that you can continue to operate at pace is critical. And I think some of that you will get from learning from each other and actually from some more formal interventions over time. But I think you just have to do what's right and not put too much pressure on yourself or your organization to make sure you have this very formalized approach. I think you have to solve in the moment.
Awesome. So one thing I'd also like to look at that, Rick, you mentioned that also next year you're going to have the continued focus on the hybrid ways of working. So I just assume most of us have worked in a remote setting now since March. So it's 9 months already, and it looks like everybody has now, also German corporates have Microsoft Teams in place. Everybody has a Slack or something in place. Most of the companies have an HRIS to track their absence, have regular Zoom meetings, all of that. It looks like there is a lot already in place for remote work. But still, I hear it always from nearly everybody to say, next year we're going to keep that focus on remote work, how to continue on that. What would you guys say is the focus when you look at the new normal, the remote working, the hybrid ways of working, that you say, okay, even if Corona is over next year, and fingers crossed that's going to be soon, what is it that you want to focus on for this hybrid environment from 2021 on?
From our perspective, we're looking at basically providing clarity for employees. I think that's the main thing that's coming out from this, which is when you move to sort of forced remote working and everyone's sort of going through this wave of, I'm not quite sure what I'm doing or how I'm doing this, to actually this could be my preferred way of working in the future. It's like, how do we give clarity for employees? So we're looking at, creating our framework almost, and being very clear about what freedom the individuals have within that framework. There are certain things that we can and can't do, like we can't at the moment support employees just working from any location in the world that they choose to be. Now everyone would love to do that, but there's legal entity structures and there's lots of complications that we have to figure through about how we get the best solution for that longer term. But that's one of the things that we have to work through. But it's about continuing to create that framework to give clarity for employees, and then I think continuing to figure out how do we continue to listen to people's experiences and react to that. How do we continue to build trust? Because I think that's the other part, which is I don't know what it was, and I read a lot about it in the press, but as soon as employees go remote, there's this whole sense that, well, people aren't being productive, people aren't doing what they say they should be going to do. And it's like trust almost disappeared overnight. And it's like, well, how is that? And how do we continue to make sure that we don't lose the trust in our teams, and that we have the appropriate measures, whether that's OKRs for setting objectives and metrics for measuring performance, to make sure that we remove those types of anxieties for people as well, and make sure that we continue to drive performance in the right way, in a meaningful way, and allow people to work in a way that they want to work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think a lot of what Rick mentioned kind of resonates. So what we've been doing is obviously, like everyone else, responding to a pandemic. It's not a normal situation. It's quite artificial. So, but a lot of candidates and employees, both at TransferWise and at Personio, were asking, what happens after the pandemic? How do we work in the future? And I think, for us at Personio, we're definitely not going to go back to the way we were before. I think that the thinking just now that we're working through is more of like a office first, but with a kind of remote kind of approach where individuals can have, an amount of time that they'll be able to work at home. If they work remotely, then there'll be some parameters around that, because as Rick said, we can't, people just can't go to any country and start to work, because there's so many implications for us as an organization, and it's just not something that scales. So that's one thing, to provide clarity, and we're trying to do that very early next year, so that then we can communicate that to people quite clearly, so that when the time comes, when it's safe to do so, then we can start to transition to that. The other thing that we're exploring just now, we're actually doing, is piloting some remote only teams. So that's something that we've discussed internally, and there's a couple of areas that we're doing it, and we're going to assess and see how that works for us over 2021. Specifically, we want to see, you know, how do those teams live and breathe their culture? How do they work? You know, what are some of the challenges that they have, and is this something that we want to offer in some way? We'll never offer that completely as a whole company, because we want to bring people to our offices to collaborate, to plan, to work together, but we recognize that, you know, sometimes working remotely or at home is good for project work. If you're interviewing or on VCs, then it makes sense that actually you don't need to keep running to a meeting room, and you use the office for a different reason, so it becomes a different type of destination. So those things are kind of currently in play for us right now.
Interesting question from Laura, maybe on that topic. Is a head of remote or a community director style role something that you're thinking about introducing in 2021? As we become more and more distributed in our operations, this type of role seems to be building in importance. Any ideas on that, specific roles that are knowledgeable about remote work? So if you're not...
I think depending on where you are in your journey, it could be an important role. I think I've got some of the responsibilities of looking at this through various different projects within my existing team structure. You know, whether it's looking at how do we reward in this different way, how do we set up the office spaces to be destination spaces, etc. I don't have the luxury of having that specific role. I mean, I would love to be able to invest in that, but I think our journey through 21 is to try and build out some of the things we talked around and have that clear proposition. And then over time, hopefully, as we scale through 2021, we'll have even more learnings to continue to build from. It's great. I've seen a couple of those roles being advertised in the market right now, but I don't think we're certainly at Peakon ready for that role right now.
I think from my point of view, it's not. I think that you should probably lift it from the practical issues that it's a remote, like if you are at the office or not, it's the way you're working. And if it's something that you should probably like raise a bit more, it's the role of responsibility of culture or way of working, or like lifting it to that, actually like the purpose of what you do and how you do it, not if you are remote or not. And I think that is like, if it's some roles that probably should be higher prioritized now, it's like way of working culture instead of remote or not.
I think the overarching point to that is everyone should own this in some way. Like, you know, if you're a team lead, it's part of your role to make sure your team feels like its own community, part of a bigger community. So whether it's a role, because I agree with Rick, there's some HR teams that role would be wonderful but a luxury, and you know, everyone should own that in some way. But I think it's a really valid point. So at Secret Escapes, we had a wonderful chap that looked after internal comms in the team, and small things like an all hands in the country used to be everyone would just bundle into the kitchen and there were some slides up and there'd be drinks after. Now it's we test the Zoom, we pre-record some videos, we get some questions submitted beforehand, we do a follow-up write-up for those that missed it. Actually, some of the production or ops behind some of the events or comms that you would do in a company have, you know, they're more involved than they were previously. And I think to do those things well, they're incredibly important, but you need to find the capacity within your HR team, or, you know, ideally someone else, right? You know, you're there to enable them and support them, but this should be a shared responsibility. But so I think it's critical, and I think it's a theme that will continue, and I expect we'll see more of these roles come up. But, you know, I think for a lot of companies, it is a luxury depending on what your budget, etc. look like. It's really important to make sure that those activities and those responsibilities are still owned by someone, even if it's not one person, it's shared, or a couple of people. It's important to not forget about it.
Yeah, I guess just to echo that, so at Personio, we have like a task force that was set up during the pandemic. So it represented a number of different roles and people across the company that came together on a regular basis. One, to just make sure everyone was set up properly and safe and secure when working remotely. And then it's evolved over time to think, Matthias, to your point, working with my team on overall kind of culture, engagement, well-being, you know, how do we think about, you know, when we do stuff as an organization, how that needs to change. So that's been great because it's been kind of, you know, multiple hands make for easier work, I guess. And also you've got more skin in the game then, because you've got different teams who then are, you know, have to go back to their area and say, okay, this is what we've decided to do. And also they can gather feedback from their area and bring it back into that group. So that's helped. Personally, unless your strategy is, you know, to really move towards more of a remote first or remote only, I don't know, maybe some of these roles might be kind of like a trend role that you see popping up from like time to time. So yeah, probably not something that we would be looking to have at Personio.
So looking at time, 5 more minutes, and we cannot have a Personio session without talking about tools or HR tech. So this final question I want to have, it's the beauty of having 4 different companies represented here in different stages, etc. Is there any specific area of HR tooling, HR tech you're looking to either replace or get, or think of getting it for the first time in your organization next year that you think will benefit both the HR team, but eventually also business success?
I think it'd be wrong of me not to talk about sort of the benefit of Peakon, right? So for those that don't know, Peakon is an employee success platform, but I think sort of stepping back from that, I think I came from a scaled business that didn't really have the way of connecting and really listening to employees and understanding the sentiment and what was going on, and being able to then have data to be able to leverage that. And I think what I've found from being in Peakon is you get that, you know, we use our own tool, so we eat our own dog food effectively, or drink our own champagne, as one of my CPOs used to say. Then from that perspective, I just think the richness of having sort of that objective listening with data has been really helpful for me as I've transitioned and been at Peakon. So I think the continued use of sort of that as a tool has been helpful, especially if I look, you know, I joined Peakon 4 weeks before we went into lockdown. So being able to access that data, get that insight, being continually connected has been incredibly important. But the other thing I've also been doing is looking at our systems that aren't going to continue to scale with us in the same way, because we're at sort of 5 years of growth. And I think we've invested over time rightly. We've bought what we could afford through that journey. It's been useful for that part of our journey, but then recognizing actually what's not going to scale with us and make some investment choices to do that in HRIS tools. You know, we're also looking at like ATS type tools as well, but we're just trying to make sure that what we invest in now is A, what we can afford, but B, is going to continue to scale with us for the next 5 years. So we're actually looking at the whole HR infrastructure across most of the tools and platforms.
Right. How about the others?
We are in the middle right now of implementing a more performance management structure and tools to actually support it. And I think that is a kind of interesting tool and process to look at in the stage that we are, because a lot of tech teams in rapid growth are I would say that they're a bit afraid of actually talking about performance, and we are looking into both a tool and process that are supporting talking about both engagement and performance at the same time, but kind of that is more towards the tech sector. But because my opinion is that people are a little bit afraid of actually talking about this, because they are more focused on the actual delivery and the journey and like being developed, and having to talk about your own performance and your own development. That is a bit scary, and I think that is like finding a way around that is what we are looking for right now, to actually put that on the table, but in the right manner.
So I guess I can go next. So similar to Rick, I won't do any shameless plugs of Personio, but one of the things that, you know, that obviously we use Personio as our kind of core people platform, and it, you know, has really helped the team to scale, you know, over the last few years, particularly around automation, you know, reporting, and now kind of lots of great and future integrations and product features growing as well. So, you know, I think for me advice of like when I look back at my younger self is like if you can find a solution, whether it be in HRIS or ATS, whatever it is that you need, it's most important for your business that can scale with you over time. It does go to how much you can afford, of course, like, cost is a big factor for sure. But trying to think about, what's the best partner for you, whatever it is that can grow with you and that have got, a great journey ahead of them. They've got a great roadmap, and they will also think about what your needs are in time as well. And you can feed into that, which is key. And then the other part for me, just specifically of where we're at just now, is thinking about workforce planning. It's not a very sexy topic, but actually it's a really important topic when you're scaling. So when you get to the part where you're maybe doubling in size each year, doing it on Google Sheets or spreadsheets is not the right approach, or it's not a time effective approach, and it does create a lot of extra overhead. So having something that can integrate with your kind of HR platform in time could be great, but at least having a separate platform that can help you with workforce planning is definitely something I would invest in, or will be investing in this year for where we're at.
So, Chloe, final words from you on tools.
I think everything that the guys have just said is really valid. And the only other thing I would add, and Ross touched on it at the beginning of the session, was a lot of employee experiences or touch points are going to move to be more system digitally based, particularly if you've got all remote teams or hybrid working. You need to rethink some of those moments that might feel a bit transactional to someone, like changing their pension or adding a partner to private medical or onboarding. A lot of that's going to become more system digitally based. How do you still make that a great experience for someone? And I think, tools, platform systems you need to enable that, but you want to make sure you're not losing how it feels to someone on the other end. Would be the only other thing I would add. Thinking about tech and employee experience is really important.
Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for the great insights into next year. Thanks for taking the time. Thanks to all the attendees for the great session, good questions.